When a simple black woman walked into a luxury bank wearing a faded t-shirt and sneakers, no one took her seriously. The staff sneered, mocked her quietly, and refused to believe the million-dollar check in her hand was real. They called her a fraud, a joke, a mistake. What they didn't know was that her husband owned the very bank they worked for, and one phone call would turn their world upside down. Clarice's footsteps echoed softly across the polished marble floor. She wore a plain gray t-shirt, loose-fitting jeans, and worn-out sneakers she'd owned for years. Her curly hair was tied back in a messy bun, and in her left hand she carried a plastic grocery bag from a nearby corner store. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance. No expensive jewelry, no designer handbag, no luxury fragrance. Just a simple black woman walking into a bank to deposit some money. The bank itself looked more like a miniature palace. Cream marble walls, glimmering chandeliers, and sharply dressed employees in tailored suits and silver ties. Everything sparkled, except their eyes when they saw her. Clarice calmly walked up to the teller line. From her grocery bag she pulled out a check. It was neatly folded, clean, and worth $1 million. A number large enough to silence any room, but it wasn't the check that drew the tension in the air, it was the woman holding it. A young receptionist spotted her from across the room and nudged a co-worker. "Look at her. What's she depositing, coupons?" The teller at the counter raised her brows as Clarice stepped forward. When Clarice politely handed over the check, the teller stared at it without reaching for it. Is this check really yours?" she asked, her tone heavy with suspicion. Clarice nodded with a calm smile. "Yes, I'd like to deposit it into my account. Clarice Marshall." "Marshall?" the teller repeated, half laughing. "Do you have any ID?" Clarice reached into her pocket and handed over her identification. The teller inspected it far longer than necessary, then glanced behind her and waved for the branch manager. Moments later, a tall man with a deep red tie walked briskly over. His face looked tense, as if something serious had happened. "Where did you get this check?" he asked without introducing himself. His voice was sharp, almost accusatory. Clarice answered gently, "It's from a property sale. My husband and I." "Right?" he cut her off with a smirk. "We'll need to verify this thoroughly. Please come with me to the review room." People turned to look. A few customers stared openly as if she'd just been caught doing something criminal. But Clarice simply took a quiet breath and followed the manager, still holding the $1 million check now treated like evidence in a crime. The bank had no idea who they were dealing with. The review room was small, windowless, and cold, nothing like the golden glamour of the lobby. Clarice sat on a hard plastic chair across from the manager, who was now joined by another senior staff member. Both men sat stiffly, their eyes fixed on her as if she might run off with their vault. "We've seen a lot of fraud lately," the manager said flatly. "You understand why this is necessary." Clarice nodded slowly. "I understand you have procedures. But the way you're treating me, it's not about procedure, is it?" Neither of them answered. The second man cleared his throat and opened a laptop. "We're going to need to contact the issuer of this check. Do you have a business card from the company?" "I don't," she replied calmly. "But my husband can explain everything." The men exchanged a look. One of them muttered, "Of course he can." The sarcasm in his voice wasn't hidden. Clarice reached for her phone. "I'll call him." She tapped a number. It rang once, twice. Then a deep, clear voice answered, "Clarice? Everything all right?" "Yes, love," she said gently. "The bank is having doubts about the deposit." There was a short pause on the other end. Then, in a more serious tone, the voice said, "Put the manager on the phone." Clarice handed the phone to the man across from her. "It's for you." He took the phone with visible reluctance, putting it to his ear. "Yes, who is this?" His face changed in an instant. He stood up. "Sir." Yes, of course. I apologize. Immediately, sir. Right away." The other staff member looked confused as the manager handed back the phone like it was a grenade. Clarice calmly put it back in her bag. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," the manager said, voice cracking. "Would you like some water? Perhaps a private lounge while we finish the deposit process?" Clarice didn't answer right away. She just stood up. "I'd like to return to the lobby," she said. "I'm not hiding. I'm depositing a check." They walked her back through the marble hall, but this time no one whispered. No one stared. Every staff member stood a little straighter. The receptionist who had mocked her earlier now avoided her eyes completely. At the front door, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up. A chauffeur stepped out and opened the back door. And out stepped a tall black man in a tailored navy coat and polished shoes. His presence turned every head in the room. Andre Marshall, real estate mogul, billionaire investor, owner of several luxury towers across the city. And, as it turned out, one of the largest silent shareholders of the very bank they had just tried to humiliate his wife in. He walked straight to Clarice, kissed her on the cheek, then turned to the stunned lobby. "Is this how you treat your clients?" he asked calmly. "Or is this how you treat my wife?" Silence. Clarice smiled and took his arm. They walked out together, leaving a room full of red faces and unanswered questions. The ride home was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional glance Andre gave her, full of pride and quiet rage. Clarice stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Skyscrapers, traffic lights, people in suits rushing between meetings, none of it impressed her. She had seen it all. She had helped build it. "They didn't even ask who I was," she said finally, her voice low. Andre exhaled, his jaw tense. "They never do. Not when you look like us." She turned to him, her eyes calm but burning. "I don't want a press statement. I don't need them fired. I want something more permanent." Andre nodded. "Consider it done." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek tablet. With a few taps, he brought up a list of board members and executive names tied to the bank's upper leadership. Clarice didn't look away. "I want diversity audits, hiring reports, front desk staff retrained from scratch. Every branch," she said. "And I want it named after someone who knows what it feels like to be judged before you speak." Andre looked at her, then smiled. "You?" Clarice didn't smile back. "No. My grandmother, Ruth Daniels. The maid they never saw. The cleaner who knew all their secrets." Andre tapped the screen again. "The Ruth Daniels Foundation. It starts now." As the Rolls-Royce pulled into the gated driveway of their quiet estate on the edge of the city, Clarice finally let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The iron gates opened slowly, revealing the sprawling mansion hidden behind tall hedges and rose gardens. No security guards barked orders. No cameras followed her steps. It was her home. Her peace. Inside, everything was calm and warm. A maid greeted them at the door with tea, and their dog came running down the hall. Clarice crouched to pet it, her t-shirt now wrinkled from the long day, her jeans still bearing the weight of strangers' assumptions. Andre stood behind her in silence, then asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" She rose to her feet and looked at him. "Because I shouldn't have to." The next morning, the same marble-floored bank looked different. The staff wore nervous smiles, the receptionist had her hair extra neat, and the manager checked his watch every 5 minutes. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one knew how to prepare for it. At exactly 10 o'clock, a luxury SUV pulled up. It wasn't Clarice. It was a woman in a dark suit with a tablet in her hand and an expression that could cut glass. She walked in, flashed a badge that read Executive Compliance Oversight, and said 3 words that chilled the room. "Corporate sent me." Behind her, 2 men in sharp suits followed, carrying files and a portable scanner. Within minutes, the branch was being audited. Clarice didn't return that morning. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any speech. But at noon, when the lobby was nearly empty, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered in a crisp white envelope with embossed gold lettering. The manager opened it with trembling fingers. It wasn't from Andre. It wasn't from the board. It was from Clarice. The letter was handwritten, simple and graceful, just like her. "To the staff at this branch. Yesterday I walked into your bank as a woman. Not as a number, not as a threat, and certainly not as a suspect. I expected professionalism. I received humiliation. You judged me because I didn't look like someone who should hold $1 million check. You assumed I didn't belong. I don't need your apology. I need you to remember that the next time someone walks in wearing a t-shirt and sneakers. Because one day it won't be me. And that person might not have a billionaire husband. But they'll still deserve respect." The letter was posted on the staff room wall that afternoon. Required reading. And that evening, after a long day of scrambling, apologizing, and updating training manuals, the bank's regional director placed a call to Andre Marshall. "I just want to say we are deeply sorry," he said. "We didn't know who she was." Andre's voice on the other end was calm, cold, and final. "That's the problem," he said. "You didn't think she could be someone." Then he hung up. Clarice stood barefoot in the garden, the sun warming her skin as she gently clipped herbs for dinner. Birds chirped from the trees, the wind danced through her curls, and for the first time in 2 days, her shoulders felt light. Inside the kitchen, the news played softly on the radio. Her name was never mentioned, but the headlines hinted at everything. Major bank launches urgent policy overhaul after internal scandal. Unidentified client sparks diversity reform across financial giant. Mystery woman's check triggers corporate wake-up call. Clarice smiled without turning around. She didn't need them to say her name. Later that evening, she sat on the back patio with Andre. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and orange. He poured her a cup of mint tea, his eyes gentle as he watched her. "They're scared of you now," he said with a quiet laugh. She shook her head. "Let them be. But I don't want fear. I want growth. I want the next Clarice to walk in with her head high and be treated like she matters." Andre raised his cup. "To that." They sat in peaceful silence, two giants in plain clothes, far from the noise of boardrooms and gold-plated vaults. For Clarice, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about being seen. Not as a billionaire's wife. Not as a black woman holding a check. Not as a mistake to be corrected. Just as enough. And now, finally, they would have no choice but to see her that way. Moral of the story: never judge someone by their appearance, status, or the assumptions tied to their skin color. True worth is not worn on the outside. It's carried in silence, in dignity, and in the strength to stay calm when the world tries to belittle you. Respect should never be earned through titles, wealth, or connections. It should be given freely because every human being deserves it. This story reminds us that humility and grace carry more power than arrogance ever could, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything.